Does Friday the 13th on the NES hold a special place in your heart like me? Then you're gonna love the secrets, history, and strategies I'm gonna share in this video. Let's get started. If this is your first time here at the channel, my name is Tyler, and if you love gaming from all generations like we do here at G3, then consider hitting that subscribe button and hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss anything. It was pretty much impossible to grow up in the 80s and have not heard of Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th movies. I was an only child, but I had a bunch of older cousins I was really close to, and since I was the youngest, I was the perfect target for any scaring type game for their enjoyment, and for the most part, a Jason mask was their method of choice for freaking me out. So even though I didn't watch a Friday the 13th movie until the late 80s, I had already figured out that Jason wasn't someone you wanted to mess with. It was the night before Thanksgiving in 1989, and we always went to my cousin's house out of town for Thanksgiving, and we would go out and rent movies the night before for all of us to watch. My cousins and I were checking out the NES games to rent, and a few of my older cousins saw the Friday the 13th game and decided to rent it for us all to play. A few of us huddled around the TV in my cousin's room that night and fired up his NES to what I still believe is one of the best title screen animations for the system. I just watched while my older cousins took turns with the counselors trying to hunt down Jason and save the children at Camp Crystal Lake. But none of us really had a clue what was going on, and when we finally saw Jason for the first time in a cabin with his purple overalls and blue mask, we were all a little confused. We didn't have a manual since we rented the game, so we didn't last long before Jason wiped us out. I didn't play the game again until I found a copy of it at a secondhand store years later, and they actually had the manual with the game, so this opened my eyes to so many undiscovered items and strategies on how to play the game. Now before we dive into the manual, let's get a little background on the development and history of this misunderstood NES game. Friday the 13th is a survival horror NES game published by the infamous toy and video game company LJN. Now before you completely dismiss this game on this one fact, I think it's essential to explain exactly what role LJN played in bringing games to the public. For starters, LJN was originally a toy company founded by Jack Friedman, and it brought us some very popular 80s toys like the Thundercats and WWF Superstars figures. Given LJN's success in the 80s, the giant media corporation who owned Universal Studios named MCA decided to acquire LJN in 1985 so they could sell licensed toys for any movie that Universal made. LJN then decided to try to cash in the video game market during that time, and with MCA they had the money to purchase licenses for hit movies to try to make a quick buck off the film's popularity by making a video game based on the movie. But the most important factor here is that LJN didn't develop any of their own games themselves. They had every game made for them by a third-party developer, and they simply published the game. So I feel it's completely unfair to just write games off as bad just because you see that LJN logo. Friday the 13th was actually developed for LJN by the Japanese company Atlus, who is still a very well-respected developer today, with some of their most popular games coming from the Persona RPG franchise. Atlus was also responsible for the Karate Kid NES game, which I think gets a bad rap too. Friday the 13th was released in North America for the NES in February 1989. You get your pick of one of 6 counselors at Camp Crystal Lake, and you have to keep the children and other counselors in the camp safe from Jason. Now defeating Jason once is hard enough, but you actually have to beat Jason 3 times before you actually beat the game, because the entire game takes place over 3 days. You get to experience side-scrolling action around the camp, some turn-by-turn over-the-shoulder gameplay in the cabins, and you spend a lot of time using the map to help guide you around the camp. Now while this game was common to see in stores, and I had a lot of friends who owned the game, it was not well received by critics. And it's not just the angry video game nerd who said Friday the 13th was bad. Even Nintendo Power ranked it number 6 in its 10 worst games of all time list in its 100th issue back in 1997, saying, "After a few minutes of playing this aardvark, you wanted Jason to slaughter all the counselors and then you. Anything so it would just end." I really don't agree with this list either, cause it actually says that games like Beethoven and Color the Dinosaur are better games. I mean really? This is a game where literally all you do is color a dinosaur. No way that's a better game than Friday the 13th. So the game wasn't loved by everyone, but there obviously has to be somewhat of a cult following for the game, because even a special edition Funko Pop figure has been created that features Jason with the iconic NES colors. Ronnie Hobbs, who is one of the co-creators of the 2017 Friday the 13th game, has great memories of the NES title as well, saying that he remembers purchasing the game on its release date in 1989 when he was 11 years old, and they even created a special retro gaming skin for Jason in the game. And even the AVGN himself, James Rolfe, admitted in a 2015 James and Mike Mondays episode that he actually kinda likes this game. So it seems I'm definitely not alone in enjoying the NES version. And while we're on the topic of the purple and blue Jason, I was never exactly sure why the developers chose those colors for Jason's game sprite. Like me, I'm sure there are many people who think it was just to make Jason look less threatening for the family-friendly NES, or it was just to make him look less bland on the NES color palette. Now, while I think those ideas may be a factor, I came across some interesting finds during my research for this episode that I feel may have influenced the developers. So we know the game was developed in Japan, and the marketing campaigns for the Friday the 13th movies in Japan are different than it is in the US. Part 3 was apparently one of the most advertised and influential to pop culture movies in Japan in the early 80s. But in Japan, they actually gave theater goers programs for the movie, which had the main poster on the front cover and some extra movie art on the back. Now, given the popularity of Part 3 in Japan, it was probably pretty easy to find one of these programs back then, and since there was no internet to find a picture of Jason, the developer may have looked to one of these programs for inspiration. And guess what's on the back cover? An axe-wielding Jason in purple overalls and an indigo blue mask. I wasn't able to find any information that this poster was released in the US, and I know I'd never seen it personally. And to further support my theory that the developers used Part 3 for inspiration in designing the game, comes in the weapons available in the game. The pitchfork is the most powerful weapon in the NES game, and Jason only used the pitchforks in 3 of the films. Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. So this means the developers could have been looking at older Friday the 13th films for inspiration, because the box art for the game says the copyright for the source code and game development was from 1988. This means parts 5 through 7 were available as well, but Jason never had a pitchfork in those films. I know it's just speculation, and LJN didn't really leave much of a paper trail about their developers, but I really think this poster may have had a lot to do with Jason's final design. Now let's get back to the manual and some of my overall strategy tips to give us a better plan of attack for taking down Jason. I do think it's hilarious how specific the manual starts out telling you how to play the game, because it blatantly says, and I quote, "After pressing the start button on the title screen, you must press it again to clear the copyright screen." Now come on, I think we could have figured that one out on our own. So the game starts out with a map screen where you can choose one of the 6 counselors scattered throughout the small cabins in the camp. Each counselor has their own different abilities, such as running faster and jumping higher. Mark and Chrissy are the rockstar counselors here, and definitely can get you to places quicker than the others, so these 2 are the ones you're going to rely on the most. Poor George and Debbie are the weakest links in the game. It just seems to never turn out well for young people named George in horror movies. Once you choose a counselor, a quick cutscene pops up to tell you to use your torch to light all the fireplaces in the cabins. First off, this is completely not true. A torch is crucial in this game, but it's not used to light the fireplaces. I mean, you can light all the fireplaces in the game, but that's done by using the lighter, not the torch. The lighter is the first item you get after you defeat a couple zombies, so you shouldn't have any trouble finding it. I personally don't waste time lighting the fireplaces because it only gives you a flashlight, which is really only helpful for finding secret passages in the cave. And the cave portion of the game is totally optional. So once the game actually starts, you'll be on a side-scrolling portion of the game, and you will start out with only a rock as your weapon. The key tip here is to crouch before you throw a rock at your enemies so you don't accidentally throw the rock over their head and you lose some health. Now, the most frustrating part of this game when you're first starting out is learning how to walk in the right direction on the map. So pay close attention here, and it's not as hard as it looks. So the map basically consists of 3 circles. The large outer circle around the perimeter of the camp, the circle around the lake and children's cabins, and the circle around the cave, which is the lair of Pamela Voorhees, Jason's mother. Whenever your counselor's on one of the circles, they can only move in a clockwise or counterclockwise direction. If you move your player left, they will move clockwise on the map. If you move them right, they will move counterclockwise. It's just that simple. And if you're not sure you're heading in the right direction, just hit the pause button and you can see if you're on the right track. Let's talk about the cabins. There are small cabins, large cabins, and children's cabins in the game. The small cabins are where all the other counselors will be scattered throughout the camp. If you enter one of these cabins with another counselor occupying it, then you can swap weapons, heal them with vitamins, and so on. But you also can switch to any counselor on the map if you enter any small cabin and hit the start button and just select that counselor. This can save you a lot of time if you need to get to another counselor or the children quickly before Jason kills them. The large cabins contain the fireplaces, which, like I said already, I don't really worry about, and they also have special messages and clues to help you in the game. The The children's cabins are the 3 cabins on the north side of the lake that can only be reached by boat. There are a total of 15 children, and you have to have at least 1 child and 1 counselor alive at the end of the 3 days to beat the game. This means that on day 1, it's very important that you don't let Jason kill any children. As soon as the Jason alarm goes off for the children's cabins, you gotta stop what you're doing and get to the lake as soon as possible. If you don't do anything and let the Jason alarm timer run down to 0, he will kill 5 children in the cabin, and remember, you only start with 15 kids and they have to last for the entire game. And it gets really tough if you go into day 2 or 3 with 10 or less children. The wooded areas in the game don't have clear defined maps, so it's pretty easy to get lost. I really only go in there to find the torch and the axe in the North Woods, and to grind for some quick vitamins, so it's best to just stay on the well-mapped paths. There are many weapons you have at your disposal, and you've already been introduced to the rock. The next weapon you'll find will be the knife, as you easily take out some zombies on the path. After you kill 60 zombies, you can get the machete. The axe is my second weapon of choice that I normally hand off to Chrissy, and I'll show you how to get that one easily here soon. The main weapon you need to quickly get as soon as the game starts is the torch. It's the second most powerful weapon in the game, and you can immediately grab it on day 1. Plus it takes 1 life bar off Jason per hit, just like the most powerful weapon in the game, the pitchfork. But you can only get the pitchfork on day 3, so I find it's kinda pointless. Get it? Pointless? Because a pitchfork has points. Anyway, here's the quickest route to get to the torch. You have to quickly acquire the lighter, knife, and key before you can get the torch with this method. You can conveniently find these items along the bottom southeast curve and the southeast straight section of the circle around the lake. When the game first starts, we know that Mark or Chrissy are the fastest running counselors. So I look to see which of those 2 are closest to that section of the map, and I start with that. After you get the items I just spoke about, keep heading as fast as you can to the large cabin on the north side of the lake. Enter the cabin and take 1 step forward inside, look to the right, and take the message on the floor. Now exit the cabin and head clockwise to the North Woods nearby. Head to the right and go up the first path you see. Then go up again and you'll be at the entrance of a hidden large cabin. But don't go inside yet. Hit the down button and you'll go back to the path you were just before. Press up again to re-enter the entrance to the cabin. Now go forward. Once inside the cabin, head forward 1 step, turn to the right, and find another secret message you need to grab. Now turn around and exit the cabin. Once you exit the cabin, head right and go down the first downward path you see. Head right again and go down the first downward path for a second time. You'll now be back on the road circling Crystal Lake. So head counterclockwise back to the large cabin north of the lake where we started. Head inside, walk 1 step forward, and turn around to face the door like you're exiting, and a torch will appear on your right hand side. Pick it up and head to a nearby small cabin to literally pass the torch to one of your other counselors. Now quickly use the same pattern we used to get to the hidden cabin in the North Woods again. Walk 1 step forward in the cabin and turn around to exit and pick up the axe. Now exit the woods with the same pattern as before. And now you're back on the main road and you have 2 of the more powerful weapons to finally start hunting down Jason. And before you get all cocky and make a quick dash for Jason, make sure you don't jump to avoid enemies after you have these weapons, because you can easily jump and accidentally grab a weaker weapon like the knife and lose your torch or axe, and you'll have to start the process to get them all over again. Now let's talk about how to beat Jason. You encounter Jason in 2 ways. In a punch-out style rhythm-based fight in the cabins, or in a side-scrolling view outside. Jason's fighting style in the cabins changes on each day. On the first day, he moves slowly and mostly uses single hits you can easily dodge, with the occasional double hit which you can easily avoid with a little practice. Now the first day is the only one I recommend fighting Jason in the cabins because his pattern is more predictable. Jason moves faster and more sporadic in days 2 and 3, especially day 2, and if you get out of rhythm you can lose health pretty quick, because each hit from Jason in a cabin takes 8 bars off your health, and you only have a total of 32 bars per counselor. Just keep an eye on that Jason alarm, and as long as you are using the torch or axe, you should take down Jason on day 1 pretty easily if you just use a little patience. On day 2, I recommend using a little trick to lure Jason out of the cabins, because you can do a lot more damage to Jason on the road, and he actually doesn't cause as much damage to you with each hit when you fight him outside. Now make sure you have the torch or axe equipped with whatever counselor you choose to fight Jason. When the Jason alarm goes off in a counselor's cabin, walk inside the cabin he's attacking and immediately press start. Switch to any new counselor as long as it's not the one in the cabin with Jason. Now hit the start button again and switch back to the original counselor you're wanting to fight Jason with. Now immediately exit the cabin and Jason will follow you and fight you on the road. You can deal a ton of damage here and try to trail him as soon as he goes off screen, and sometimes it will let you fight him again and you can probably kill him for that day. Use the exact same strategy for day 2 on the 3rd day, and by this point you should have the hang of it pretty well, and you can finally destroy who the manual calls the Maven of Mayhem, the Sultan of Slash, the ghoul that everyone loves to hate, Jason Voorhees. Now there are other parts of the game I really didn't touch on, like being able to navigate the cave and fight Jason's mother for special weapons and items, most notably a sweater on day 2 that helps you reduce the amount of damage you take, but it also decreases the chances of you running into Jason on the road, which is the exact opposite of what we want on day 2 and 3, because that's where you really want to fight Jason. If you would like to know how to easily find his mother in the cave, you can let me know in the comments below and I can help you, but this part of the game is completely optional. I truly believe that Friday the 13th was one of those NES games that has been misunderstood and was a little ahead of its time with all the strategic elements involved, with not the best explanation of how to fully approach the game in the manual. Pair that with LJN's current online reputation and it really has an uphill battle to appeal to gamers today. I hope this video brought back some fun memories for you if you enjoyed this game back in the day like me, and I also hope some of my tips for the game can help anyone finally beat Jason if they haven't done it before, and maybe put a more positive spin on the game's reputation today. If you enjoyed this video and are a fan of the NES Friday the 13th game too, then give this video a thumbs up and share some of your memories or tips in the comments below. Till next time guys, G3 out.